There we go. Sorry about that false start. Hey, good morning, artists. Happy Tuesday. We are continuing to work on our landscaping today. Sorry, I'm a little bit flustered because we had a little technical difficulty with the phone, and it started streaming, but I don't know what was happening. It wasn't processing right, so the camera was really jerky, so I had to restart everything. But we are going to be continuing to work on our landscape today. We'll probably finish it up, hopefully before the hour is up. And then just a heads up, I know you guys have gotten a schedule from the school talking about how you have a different subject every day that you should focus on. So like Monday was working on math and English and social studies and so forth. And they saved electives, saving the best for last, of course, putting us on Friday. So if you are working on your other classwork and you don't have time to get to your art project until Friday, that's fine. You have the whole week that you can work on it. I'm still going to be posting up the assignment early so you have an idea of what you are expected to have done by the time you get to Friday. So I like having you guys be prepared ahead of time, and that's how we're going to kind of work things. So good morning. I see people starting to show up in the chat. It's great. Let's get to our project. So hopefully you have it from yesterday. Here we go. Yeah. So here's where we were at yesterday. We were working on doing our nice landscape that had our different levels. We had our sky, our horizon line, our background, our midgrounds 1 and 2, and our foreground. And we worked on doing a couple different kinds of trees. We got our river in there, got a nice little rock happening. So now we're going to be working on adding some other stuff to this. So just as a reminder, things that are closer to the viewer are lower on the page. So these things up at the front, they are the closest to the person who's looking at this. Higher up the page you go, the further away things are getting. And because they're getting further away, they need to get smaller. So that's one of the reasons why we have 2 little trees in here, just to help show that space between something in the front and something towards the back. All right? So we're going to actually do a little bit of light planning to start with. We want to get a couple things in here that we know we want to have. So I want to start off with doing some little hills or mountains way in the background. You want to be careful though, if you do put something like a river in your scenery, you don't want to put a mountain right where that river is starting from, because usually a river is starting from a lower point. So you could do, let's have our mountain kind of start from where the river ends, goes behind our tree, just see a little bit, maybe it comes back up again, a little double hill range there, and then we'll do another one on the other side. We won't do any shading on these yet because we want to get our plan in first, but what you definitely want to try and do is make sure that they're not all exactly the same. They're not all the same roundness, they're not all the same height. Have some that maybe are a little bit flatter, more like a nice hilltop. And then if you want to do like super mountains, we're talking about like Rocky Mountains, Colorado type mountains, then you can do things that are a little more jagged looking. That jaggedness you'll see a lot more in something that's off in the distance. So let's even have this one go off the page. This is a huge mountain. So just getting a plan, okay? We're planning that our sun, let's put a little sunset happening. Now keep in mind, when we were talking about the no-no, the things we don't want to do, we don't want to have sticks, number 1. That's absolutely not. We also don't want our sun to get too large. Having it so large in a scene, the sun doesn't take up that much room in the sky. When you're actually looking up into the sky, you can put your hand up and block out the sun from hitting you in the face, which means when you think of how big the sky is around you, That's just a very small space that you are able to block it from. So our sun peeking out between our mountain and our hill here, it's going to be pretty small. And you don't want to outline it very dark because the sun is not dark at all. It's very bright. So we're just doing a very light little outline of it. I want to put in, kind of off on the middle side here, I want to put in a little forest that's in the distance. Now we're not going to draw individual trees because this is pretty far away. So what we are going to do is draw a very scribbly little line. I'm going to just go right across the whole bottom. And maybe as it gets toward the side, it starts to get a little bit taller. We'll leave the bottom straight, following our horizon line. But then as we get past our tree here, let's start to bring that line a little bit wiggly and bring it down a bit. That's going to give us this feeling that this forest that is so far in the distance is actually coming around and going to be coming closer to us. So by making it get wider toward the end, it starts to feel like it's coming toward us. So just some plans to start getting the background showing a little bit. We're going to bring it back to the front now and start adding in some other little details. When you have something like a river, you're very rarely going to see a nice perfect line like this. Either it's going to come up to kind of a sandy shore, or it's going to come up to just grass. We're going to give it a tiny bit of a shoreline though. You're not going to see too much of it near the top. What you're going to do is once you get past this first curve, we're going to add another little line here. This is going to be our little kind of sandy beach area. So what I'm going to do is sneak in and I'm going to do a couple little just dots. Just so we can tell that this is definitely different from the water. And you're going to have a little bit of a sandy area anyway. Most rivers will have times where they are a little bit higher because of rainfall and sometimes where they are a little bit lower. So anybody who lives near a lake or a river can tell you that there are times where the water is a bit higher, it comes up a bit further. So by adding this, this gives us the feel that the river sometimes swells a little bit, so nothing really is able to grow there. And sneaking around on this curve, do the same thing on the other side. So whenever you're doing any kind of a sandy scene, a beach, doing these dots can be helpful for breaking up that area to make it look like it's a little bit sandier. And then you can sneak in and add more little rocks, like we have our one down here. Maybe a couple big rocks that washed down the river. Put a couple little ripples in, same down here. We'll make this one a bit of a different shape. And this one's a little bit on the shoreline too. So little scribbles on the rocks. Again, you don't need to shade it in perfectly solid. That little bit of irregularity helps. A few little ripples around the edge. There. So since this is kind of a grassy area now, we're going to add in some different little grass details. Now this is where your lines are really going to come in helpful. When you work with grass, the further away you get, you're not going to be drawing every individual blade of grass. That would be ridiculous. You're not going to see it from that far. But from this close, we can start to add a little bit. You're definitely going to want to show some around any edges. So edges around where the water is, where the sand has started, we're going to start sneaking in some little groups of lines. Now as you get further into just the big open type spaces, you can start to spread them out or even do some bigger clumps of it. So definitely have some near the edge to show that that's what's happening. There is grass happening at this point, and then start to space it out. So as you get further away, less big group, more clumps. And since this is right on our line here, we're going to have just a few down near the bottom, but then we're getting up into a different space. So we're not going to do too much on this side just yet. Just some short little bits of grass. If you want to sneak in any kind of plant life at this point, you could sneak in one of my favorites, a cattail, which is a long stem with what looks like a little hot dog at the top. And it's got these nice long leaves. Fun little addition. Okay. So we're going to start moving back now. The bottom of our tree, since this is another line, just like where the grass versus sand ends, we're going to sneak in there and put in little bits of grass around the tree. Usually grass tends to grow a little better near the bases of trees, mostly because the water gets blocked off from the leaves, so you don't get the grass growing as much right around the tree, but as the water drips down the trunk and gathers, you can have some pretty good growth down across the bottom. And of course, smaller little bits along the edge of our sand. Now you'll notice in this new section, you want to do smaller lines. So you've got bigger lines at the bottom. In the next section, they start getting much smaller, save around the tree there. So our little groupings are going to be much shorter. Because the rule is, as you get further away, things are going to start to get smaller. So you got very small little groups of grass here. And I'm not trying to be perfect about it. I'm trying to just be very kind of loose and just not all going the same direction. Some of them are going to the side a little bit. They're a little diagonal. And then we start bringing that in over here as well. Maybe start sneaking another little plant starting to grow near the rock there. Just a hint. Little groups. Found out this music track, if you can hear it in the background, YouTube does not demonetize for it. Not that we're looking for that, but it's nice to not have any kind of alert popping up saying you can't post this. Although that's only happened once, which is good. Just going to sneak in a couple little extra lines in between just to fill it in. Okay. And at this point, I'm going to sneak in, I'm going to erase just these lower lines. Just that lower one. Okay. And we do want the ground to have a little bit of shading happening, but we're going to get to that all together. So in the next row, I want to add a little something on here because we're a little bit plain still. Let's add in a little bush that's sitting off to the side here. Now, depending on what kind of a bush you're working with, you can either go with jagged lines, kind of like the evergreen trees, so like an evergreen bush, or do something that's more like a leafy bush. So we'll do a little leafy one. They tend to be very similar to a tree, and we're going to be doing this right at the edge of the page. Thank you, Sharon, for your compliment. I like that too. So instead of the letter Y, we're more going for a V in a way, because it breaks up. Bushes break up a lot faster than a tree does. They are much lower to the ground. They're going to split off a lot sooner. They're going to be a little bit taller in the middle. So I'm still doing that same kind of Y energy, but a lot closer to each other. And again, if you're doing something that maybe this is in the winter, or you want the plants to look a little spooky, it's Halloween time, and you want them to be without leaves, you can just leave it at this point. But we're going to go in and do our super swirly, adding in the leaves. Lots and lots of spirals. And if you can, try to remember that little trick of making the outside edge pretty dark, and then when you go to overlap, you make the one that's overlapping a little bit lighter right where it's going behind. And then where it's in front, you get a little bit darker. Now, as we move into this new area, the grass is no longer really going to be visible. You're just going to have the tiniest of dots and tiny, 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 tiny lines in little groups. So you don't want to go all over the way you did for the sand. You're doing in tiny little groups. And the closer you get to the bottom, make them a tiny bit longer, but as you get toward the top, they're going into just little dots. If we were doing a whole beach scene, at this point, the dots in the sand, we would start even blending out, so you wouldn't really see them, because the sand, of course, is much smaller particles than grass is. Add some grass around the base of our pine tree. And as you're doing this, we can start to get rid of this line between the two midgrounds. As you practice doing your landscapes and you start getting better at it, you won't even necessarily need to do those lines. They can be helpful for lining anything up if you want one thing on one side of the paper to be balanced on the other. And especially for the purposes of if I was doing some grading on making sure you had enough levels, you would definitely want to make sure to use them to check off that you have something in every level. But even just a good landscape in general should have a couple different levels to it. At the very least, foreground, background, and one midground. But the more stuff you have, the more overlapping items you have, gives you such a much better sense of space. And you can do this with other scenes too. You can do this with an underwater scene with different levels of seaweed. You can do this with alien scenes on the moon. Have moon mountains and such in the back, spaceships. You can do it in the desert, anything. Tea break. Today we have cinnamon. It's a cinnamon kind of day. So now we're going to sneak out this line too, between our midground and our background. I'm going to sneak just a couple little dots up in here, just so that it's not such an obvious line between one level and the next, just to help break it up, just a little, just a few. Don't go crazy with it. That's a great name. Hey, I'm Pancake. Welcome to our stream. All right, let's move up into our mountains now and our forest. Forest will be the easiest to start with. Between tree bark and tree leaves, this area is going to be pretty dark. I'm going to start just going straight across the bottom, nice and dark. And you can see I'm keeping that edge pretty scribbly, because I wanted to give the feel of these are different trees, different branches all sticking out. You just don't get to see them, they're so far away. Pancake, are you one of my students, or are you just coming in to hang out with us this morning? You guys don't use your real names. It's hard to tell. Now you see around the tree, I'm going to leave it a little bit lighter, just so that we can still see our tree here. Same with close to this tree. I don't want my tree to vanish. You're just here? Well, welcome, Pancake. I do this every weekday morning at 10. So if you want to come and hang out with us, that's cool. Some of these are like follow along, so you can draw with me. Some of them will just be me doing some fun art. This is our live stream for my art classes that are currently canceled. There we go. All right. So our forest is filled in. And this forest is going to come in handy now. So I kind of mentioned this yesterday, that a really good technique is to actually take your paper towel. Let's get a clean side for it. And to rub that against an area like this, where you've got a lot of pencil on it, and you're going to get some of the pencil graphite onto your paper towel. This is going to smooth it out in our trees here, but what we really want it for is to start shading in down here. So I'm going to start going just right over the grassy areas. Let's shade these in a little better while we're at it. The one thing you have to be careful of when you're using paper towel for shading is, and I'll notice students that like to rush will do this, is they'll just go over the entire thing. Well, good morning, Lori Beth in California. It's always a great way to start our day with our art. So you want to be careful not to go all the way over the entire thing. You just want to work in the areas that you want shaded. If you go over the entire thing, you run the risk of getting rid of a lot of your nice details, and it tends to make everything then look exactly the same, which you do not want. You want your grass and your sand and your water to all feel a little bit different. So I'm actually going to do some more scribbling here on my side paper so I can get a little more pencil. I don't want to take it all away from my trees back there. By having a pretty consistent shade too between all your different levels of ground and grass, it helps even this upper area to still feel like it's connected to it, that it's not something totally different. If it does feel like it's a little too separated, sneak in, pop in a couple more tiny little dots in there, blend them in, and that should help smooth it out. Work up into our mountains here. Now for these, here's a nice trick for you. I'm only going to put pencil on the left side of this hill, right here. And on this hill, I'm going to do the same thing. Kind of imagining a split down the middle. I'm only going to put pencil on one side. If you can see where your mountains, mine are hiding behind my tree branch right here, but you would bring that shading down to the dip between your mountains. And then I'm going to shade over the whole thing, kind of going in a rounded motion to match the roundedness of the hill. Just got to be careful not to run into my tree branches too much. So here's the reason why I did this. My sun is over on the right side. So by putting the pencil on the left side of the mountain, you're kind of creating a little bit of a shadow automatically, because it's going to be a little bit darker on that side even when you blend across. And it's just going to help make the mountains feel a little more three-dimensional, that they're actually existing in this world where there is a sun shining onto them. So I'm going to do the same thing with these mountains too. I'm going to use my pencil on the left side. Lightly, lightly. You see I'm holding my pencil in the middle to keep it light. And same on here. Hopefully what ends up happening is you don't end up seeing any lines at all from your pencil. They all kind of just smooth out, and it's more like a light tone versus a darker tone. If your pencil is showing up, you may have to press down a little bit harder. Pressure does help to blend things out better. So if you're ever having trouble, if you have like a weird line that's not blending out very well, try really scrubbing at it. And that's usually enough to do it. Okay. So now that I'm getting to the other side of the sun, I'm going to leave this side, left side, facing the sun as lighter, and the color on the other side. Now for the jagged mountains, you see I've kind of switched and I'm doing an up and down motion instead of across. So depending on if you want your mountains to look kind of soft, like more like grassy hills, you'll want to go in a curve like you're following the hill. If you want to do a rocky looking mountain, you're going to want to do up and down, a little more jagged. Same when you go to shade it. I'm doing tiny little up and down scribblies. A giant mountain up here too. It's one of my favorite songs, guys. Okay, and let's just do the hill while we're at it. Sideways on the hill. Now I'm going to bring the hill over just a little bit more because I don't want it to line up too perfectly with the mountain. Nature itself doesn't end up having things line up too perfectly. If ever you see things that are all in a row, it tends to look very strange. It doesn't look like it's natural anymore. So you want to try to avoid things like everything being the same height. If you have two double hills like this, you definitely want to make them look like they're different from each other. I'm just going to sneak in here at the base of the mountain and add an extra little layer of darker shading. Holding my pencil closer, doing a little bit darker, because I just want to make sure it doesn't melt into my hill too much. There we go. Much better. Alright, so let's get into the sky really briefly. I'm going to see if I can get the camera a little bit closer. There we go. Okay. So for the sky, we got our sun. I'm going to sneak in with my paper towel and just really lightly give the sky a little bit of a shade. I'm even going to erase the line where my sun is. I'm not going to go over it. I'm going to go around it, make that white. I'm just going to use my eraser and do the very faintest, as light as I can get it, line going around the sun. I don't want the sun to be glaring. I want it to be light. And the rest of the sky is a little bit darker. Now, one thing I didn't show off in our no-no work was clouds. And usually, when students start to add in clouds, it looks very similar to these trees. They tend to be these big, weird bunched up cotton ball type shapes. Clouds are not quite like that. They are not perfectly rounded like this. It's not in like a circle kind of shape. They tend to be, depending on where you're looking. If you're looking at them straight up, it's different than looking at them when you've got a horizon line. Clouds do have a larger center, but as they start to get out toward the edges, especially on a windy day, you're going to have a front to the cloud and you're going to have a bit of a tail. And then the bottom will be a little bit bumpy, but not quite perfectly rounded. Especially these big kind of stormy clouds. So from a distance, clouds tend to be a lot longer and thinner in shape. They might have almost like I feel like a comet, where it's rounded up at the front and then trails off. And that'll also give you a feeling of movement. It'll help give you a feeling of wind. But what you want to be careful of too is that you don't want to make these too dark. In fact, I wouldn't even use your pencil to draw them. I would shade in your sky, so you've got a little bit of a shade to it, and then sneak in with your eraser. And doing little circles, start to create a cloud shape, and then pull a little tail into it. It won't be too obvious at first, but then what you do is you sneak in with your pencil a little bit across, especially the bottom, and a tiny little bits into the top. Sneak little, very, very light little lines. And especially on the side that's away from your sun, you can go ahead and make a little bit darker, the bottom and the side facing away. And then sneak a couple little of those curves into the body of your cloud. Ta-da, look at that. You can also create some very small ones. You don't have to go big. Just barely there clouds. That looks good. Straighten this back up again. There we go. Getting all that zoom going. So, last thing we're going to add on here. We've got our sun, we've got our beautiful space. We do want to create a few shadows. Now, shadows happen when you have a light source and you have something that is blocking the light onto another surface. So trees, bushes, even rocks will create a little bit of a shadow from the sun. Even these mountains will be creating a little bit of a shadow. They're pretty far off, so we won't have to do too much. To handle this, we're going to go back to our scrap paper, scribble up some pencil, and get that on our paper towel. We're then going to use that, let's even try to get it as much of a point as we can, and we're going to go from the bottom of one of our objects, so like from the bottom of our tree, and you want to imagine a line going from the sun to the bottom of your tree and then away. My paper towel is pretty thick, so it's making a pretty big line, but that's still pretty good. I'm going to even sneak a little bit of pencil right at the bottom just to help it. Okay, I'm going to go to my next tree, sun, to the bottom of the trunk, go away from the sun. And since our tree fans out, right, and creates this triangle shape, we're going to want our shadow to do a little bit of the same. We're going to create a triangle shape out of our shadow. We're going to add a little bit of a round one below the rock. We need a little more scribbles. Little shadow. Little shadow. Now our tree on the other side, still do the same idea. From the sun to the bottom of your tree and away. But this time you notice your shadow is going in a different direction. Your shadow should always be pointing away from where your sun is at. So even if you do a picture where you don't have the sun, maybe the sun is way up high in the sky and it's pointing straight down on your trees and whatnot, then all of your shadows will be underneath. You always have to keep in mind where your sun is. If you can see the sun in your picture, you have to make a decision about where your shadows are going. They have to go away from your sun. And we'll do a little bit of some extra shading right near the base of the mountains, just to kind of hint at where those shadows might be. They're pretty far, so their shadow's probably not going to extend all the way into our space here, but we are going to have a little bit of a shadow happening from the forest. And there we go, guys. So if you've been following along, you guys will be able to take pictures of your finished work and either email them to me, or you might be able to post them onto Google Classroom. Either way is fine, as long as I can get it. I can get your grade in. If you choose to go in and you want to add some other things, if you want to add a couple extra trees or put a few more rocks along the way or sneak a bunny rabbit, whatever you'd like to add in there, that's totally up to you. You can add whatever you like. Hi, Batul, I'm glad you could still make it. More people in our chat. But that's about what we're going to need for you guys to turn in for this assignment, okay? Which means it's 10:45. We still got some extra time. I brought a little side art just in case. So what's going to happen is tomorrow and on Thursday and Friday, I won't be doing another follow along. I'll be doing just some fun on the side art. Those videos will not be posted on Classroom because they are not part of this actual assignment, but I will still put them up on YouTube. So if you want to see some of this other side stuff that I've been doing, you can still come and join me for just our hangout art session. And then next Monday I'll be posting up videos for the next assignment. So usually Monday, Tuesday is going to be assignment work, depending if we need into Wednesday or not, we might. But at this point, let's do the proper artist thing, which is sign it. Sign your art, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll show you what I've been working on. If you were with me through spring break especially, I was doing these really cool little characters. And they were all based on, I did a sun lady, and I did a moon girl. And this is our new one, who is being based off the planet Mercury. Mercury has its own little symbol. Looks like this. It's kind of its planetary symbol. So you're going to see that those shapes kind of repeated throughout. So her crown has that Mercury-esque shape. It's a little modified. I didn't want to make it too obvious, but it's still there. And then all of her little stripy parts of her outfit all have a little plus sign and this little half circle to represent the top of the shape. So we're continuing that throughout. Using my Micron pen now. I did most of the drawing already. That was last Friday that I was working on it. And got her started. So we're still continuing it. So tomorrow I'm being given a chance to run into the school so I can pick up some things. I should be back in time to stream. If I start a little late, apologies, but it's important that I can get the rest of my stuff to bring home. I want to grab some other art projects, ideas. Try to have some better examples for you guys. I'm kind of limited right now to my personal stuff. Not that we won't make it work. We can always make it work. Let's get these on. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? Look at that. I didn't draw her toes, guys. I didn't draw her toes. I'm trying to force myself into doing more toes. I try to skip them. I like putting socks on people, boots. Toes are tough. I think they're tougher than hands. But I do a lot more practicing with hands than I do with toes. That just looks weird. Alright, that looks less weird. That's what we aim for. Art that looks less weird. Or more weird, I guess. Depends. Art is so flexible. I'm going to give her a little extra on here. I'm usually very matchy-matchy with my drawings. I like things that are symmetrical, that where something on one side is repeated on the other. Something on one side is repeated on the other. And I'm trying to break out of that a little bit. So even having a little split in the skirt like that. Things like she's going to have this kind of tattoo on one leg. But I want to try and sneak in more, it's called asymmetry, when things don't match. So for my students, if you haven't been on your grade book lately, I did post up this morning putting in for those first 3 weeks that we were off of school. Those grades are in, so you can go and have a chance to just make sure that those got in for you. If you sent me something, like if you emailed me something, but it is not showing up, it is showing you as having a 0, please send me another email, and preferably attach the pictures again, just to make sure I have them. I've been getting tons and tons of emails, so some things may have slipped by, and I want to make sure that I get them right for you guys. So if you did send me something, send me the pictures again, or just let me know so I can hunt through and find them. If you notice you have a 0, and it's because you didn't turn something in, you can still turn things in. Please, 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 still turn in what work you have. because the state still needs to show that you guys are learning some stuff. And if you're having any trouble attaching the pictures or uploading them to Classroom, just let me know. Or do the super easy thing and Google it. It's Google Classroom. You can Google the answers to anything. It's actually pretty simple too. Google Classroom is wonderful. My old school had a different program, similar idea, where you could post assignments and whatnot. And at the time I had a computer graphics class, which meant doing lots of Photoshop and PowerPoints and videos and really big files. And unfortunately, that site could not handle all the different types of files that I needed. My Micron brand, I use the Pigma Micron Sakura company. They're my favorites. I usually buy the 3-pack of the 3, 5, and 1. So I'm using the 5 right now for these little tassels. You get your stuff turned in, but all good. Then you should have your grade in. And then when you finish up your landscape picture, make sure to get that in too. No rush if you're not working on it till Friday. If you're following the school sent schedule, that's fine. There she is. This is the other great thing about the Micron pens, is being able to just erase right over them. Make it nice and clean. So since our landscape is done, tomorrow is probably going to be coloring time. Color this nice young lady, and we're going to have some fun with that too. Since I looked up what the surface of Mercury looks like, that's got some really cool, crazy colors in there. So we'll have a little bit of fun with her outfit and such. Play with some different color combinations. Oh, we'll have to do a little my favorite, my little darkening and pre-inking, but I can probably work on that later today after my homework and stuff is done. But we'll work on that a little later, I think, because we're just about out of time. So let's get you looking this way again. Straighten that camera out. This helps me have my arm be ready for tomorrow then too. There we go. Alright, so back again tomorrow. Landscape is done, so we're done with that. We'll just be having some fun for the rest of this week, just you guys hanging out with me and coloring. And then next week we'll be getting started on a new project. We are going to need pencil, paper, and something to color with. Anything is fine. It can be crayon colored pencil, marker. We're going to be doing something that has some black and white to it, and then is also going to have a little color element to it. So I'm going to leave the rest of it as a surprise so you can see it when we get to it. All right? So you guys all stay safe and stay healthy. Don't get in any trouble. Get all your homework done. Get outside when the weather's nice enough. I don't think we're going to have rain for a while, so that's excellent. You guys can hang out and get some fresh air, please. And I guess that's it. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye-bye.